Hello, everyone, and welcome to my I Love Learning podcast. And today you might notice I have a special guest because there was a snowstorm in New York, and the guest that I had planned for today will be coming on at a later time. But today, I have Dr. Scott Anderson joining me. And, to tell you a little bit about Scott, Scott is co founder of Luma, engineer by trade, super uber inventor, has done a lot of inventions, technology, non technology, missile radar systems, sonar systems. And I am so pleased to have Scott join me today on my I Love Learning podcast. Scott, welcome. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell everyone who's listening what you're passionate about?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You actually took most of my introduction. I was essentially going to say, I'm a co-founder of Luma. My background's electrical engineering, and I'm in charge of all the technology at Luma. And as you kind of suggested, I've done a lot of systems design and work in creation. And so, like from my standpoint, I would say what I'm passionate about is just the act of creativity.
Hmm.
Something that I just really appreciate. Appreciate art, appreciate music. But when I just sit around and kind of look at everything around me, I kind of marvel sometimes that everything I see is a solution that somebody created to a problem they had. And it's something that really puts me in awe.
Oh, that's amazing. Creativity. That is something that I don't think a lot of people consider in terms of their passion. I mean, it's kind of a broad topic and interest. So, when you think about creativity, I mean, has there ever been a time that there's been something that's kind of prevented you from that stood in front of your passion of being creative or?
Mm, yeah, I would say so. For me, I kind of find that I'm the one that kind of gets in my own way usually,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to hurdles. I mean, fortunately, I have not had like a single event or a single trauma. I've probably had a lot of like micro traumas that have kind of like, um, led me into kind of an overall perception, and then, again, it's just my own perception, but sometimes perception is reality that I've kind of developed that is like, maybe others don't see me as capable. And so
Hmm.
from that standpoint, it's like I can get in my own head and in my own way to say, this is something that could potentially be, holding me back.
Hmm. It's interesting. For those of you that don't know Scott, Scott is probably one of the smartest folks that I've ever met. And he's an inventor. And to hear from him, straight from him, that, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter, where you're going, but sometimes yourself can, even at the highest level. I mean, Scott has his doctorate, he studied engineering, but you can hold yourself back, and you can be your own roadblock. And so, how, Scott, when you get into your head and when you reach, you're feeling like you can't move forward in your creativity, how do you overcome that? Or have you come up with strategies or ways when you're facing these thoughts about yourself that can help you move forward and overcome the impossible?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that I do is I get help. Um, just thinking back about this question, there was a point I remember when I was a teenager. And, I mean, when you're a teenager, there's a lot going on, right? Just like you're
Hmm.
just going through a lot and then just dealing with different feelings. And I remember there was an adult role model who I had who would spend time with me and allow me to talk to him and give me feedback. And we had this
Hmm.
back and forth. And it was just such an important time in my life. And as an adult, I look back and I think I'm just so grateful to have had his time, um, because I'm probably a little bit older than he was. We're probably around the same age
Hmm.
when I had met with him. now, and just to think, here's a guy that took time out of his busy schedule to spend time with, a teenager who really needed that. It was amazing. I mean,
Hmm.
it was just, I'm really grateful for that. So, I mean, I definitely see, and I try to pay that forward as well, but I definitely see, the value of getting help. I mean, just asking somebody, just talking to somebody about it. Um, the other thing too, and this is kind of like another big breakthrough that I had when I was young, but it's something that I've always remembered and I try to hang on to in those
Hmm.
situations, is that just realize that there are things in this world that it's okay to care about that are bigger than you. And
Hmm.
just thinking about, I mean, there's things that are just so important out there that if you can just choose to care about those things, then all of a sudden, it doesn't really matter what people think of you, or it doesn't matter, like, other problems that you have that you think are important just really are not quite as important anymore.
Hmm.
And so it just provides a larger context to, okay, really, what is it you're trying to do? What kind of good in the world can you make? And just kind of hanging on to the things that really, really matter.
Hmm. Right. So looking, instead of looking within, it sounds like instead of really, beating yourself up or feeling like you're holding yourself back, it's looking outward. It sounds like to something else that is more meaningful than even maybe what you could even conceptualize being. So that's really interesting.
Hmm.
You talk like this as a teen, as you've, grown and now you're an adult, and these struggles can still be there. What inspires you, or what moves you forward to kind of want to continue to move towards this idea of creativity and working towards something that's bigger than yourself?
Hmm. Yeah, so for me, I've always loved to try to figure out how things work,
Hmm.
especially like, in my engineering practice, um, electrical engineering. So, electrical engineering, there's a lot of different components, a lot of different parts. Like I'm on the signal and image processing side, so kind of like more algorithmically. And sometimes it's kind of like the act of creation. You see
Hmm.
something like maybe there's an algorithm or a process that somebody created, and it's like, oh my gosh, I've never seen that before. That's wild. And so I
Hmm.
really want to dig in there and I want to kind of see how it works. Um, and it's not so much that I want to necessarily recreate it, but maybe there's something in there, some methods or just some ideas in there that I can like take with me and then like apply it to another problem that I'm having or something like that. And I think there's a lot of parallels with not only kind of like that sort of like engineering practice of really wanting to know how things work, but also kind of expanding that out. Because really, when I'm talking about kind of that breakthrough that I was
Hmm.
talking about, really kind of seeing things as bigger. I mean, it kind of goes beyond that too. It's like, okay, well, really try to figure out how do you work? Like, like
Hmm.
Gina, how do you work? I mean, like,
Hmm.
what makes you tick? Really
Hmm.
exploring, why do you feel a certain way about something that happened to you? Really kind of exploring that, and even if it is a little painful, it's a little strange,
Hmm.
just really kind of digging in and seeing how things work, reading different perspectives, getting different perspectives on any problem, not just engineering problems, but interpersonal problems or whatever, to really create the solution that you need in your life at that moment.
Hmm.
I think there are a lot of parallels, and really, it just all kind of follows that theme of really trying to seek the truth and really trying to get to like how things work. To me, that's
Hmm.
kind of what inspires me on the day to day to move
Hmm.
forward. Is just, let's just try to figure this out.
Mm. What you talk about and seeking the truth is really, really similar to one of my previous guests, Timothy Gleason from Australia, who really talked about finding his true self and really believing. You talk about this idea of something, a roadblock where you don't believe in yourself, but believing in something bigger to help you get there. And I asked him this question too, like what continues to make you be happy daily? What inspires you to continue to keep moving forward and wanting to grow on a daily basis? Because that's like a really deep and kind of interesting perspective, but kind of going back to that on a daily basis, how do you do that every day to keep you happy?
Mm. Yeah, no, that's a great question. Because and it's funny enough, it's not like I have these conversations a lot, but I seem to have had this conversation a couple times in the past couple of months. And I kind of feel like maybe my viewpoint might be a little controversial, a little bit. But
Hmm.
so I've read I've read Ayn Rand a lot when I was younger, like The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. And within that, there's this romantic notion that I've really kind of attached myself to, that at the end of my life, you know, I want to be at a point where I'm completely empty. Like I've given everything I possibly can to life,
Hmm.
and really given everything, made my mark, if you want to call it that, or blazed my trail, or really got, really gave everything I can. And it's funny, the conversation that I had most recently was like, just kind of like, well, why? Like, why wouldn't you want to be full at the end of your life? And maybe it's like a question of semantics. I don't really know, but I think for me, kind of the day to day, it's kind of like wanting to just give everything I have to what it is that is bigger than me,
Hmm.
and there's a lot, there's a lot of discussion about like 4-day work weeks and things like that, which by the way, everybody call your senator.
Right, right.
I think
We're
that'd
all
be
for
awesome.
that, right?
Right.
Yeah. Let's do it.
um, yeah, but still, even like on my day off, I want to I want to contribute to whatever it is my vocation is. And so for
Mm.
me, it's not like, throwing myself into work, because I mean, yeah, I mean, we've always heard like one of the big regrets people have at the end of their life is they say, well, I wish I wouldn't have worked so much,
Hmm.
and I think there's obviously a lot to that. But the kind of work I'm thinking of is not like, okay, well, I have to go to work. It's like, no, I need to go and do my work. So it's like taking work and finding like a vocation in it. And maybe for some people they don't really have the opportunity to do that, probably most people, like in their job, but that doesn't mean they don't have a vocation. I mean, it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that you can't find something that's like so great and so important to you that you really want to just give yourself to, and as much as you can, 100% to. For me, that's like every day, if I could do that, I would be happy.
Absolutely. It's this idea of mind of a champion. It's what my podcast is about. It's finding that thing that sets your soul on fire, right? It's really
Hmm.
finding that thing. So, what really had an impact on your thinking? Was there something you can like point to that kind of led? I mean, the entire time I've known you to be creative, really driven, have this open passion of a mindset. What can you pinpoint something or something in your life that kind of was pivotal in your thinking and helping you move forward on this thought?
Um, that's a good question. I don't know that there's like one specific thing, I mean, I think it's probably the contribution to a lot of different things, I mean, I remember as a kid taking those standardized tests, and there's like different parts. There's like a math part, and then there's like all the non-math parts. I mean, I always did pretty well in the math part, and then just an extreme imbalance between like the non-math part, just not very good in the non-math part. And so um, for me, I think there was always just kind of this trying to playing catch up from that standpoint. Um, but the moment, like when I started kind of realizing, it's like, hey, you know what? I really enjoy figuring out like math, like trigonometry. I was always like, I loved math because the thing is like you're taking the real world, right? And you're actually, somebody invented this thing called math that actually takes the real world and models the real world with numbers and this stuff that you can like manipulate and understand. And for me, that was just kind of like probably the formative experience where it's kind of like, my gosh, it's really cool that I can try to understand how things work through this other construct that we've created called math. Um,
That's interesting. Well, this kind of just like moves in. You talk about math. So, Scott and I, we used to debate a lot about how engineers learned because I study learning science and how our brains traditionally assimilate and remember information isn't how engineers are taught. And so Scott talking right now just demonstrates why Scott did so well from a learning science perspective in math is because the way he thinks about and sees and can visualize this creative pattern of thinking in his mind. But any case, Scott, in terms of authentic learning, I mean, I would say that engineering traditionally isn't taught in an authentic way. However, you just described the whole purpose of engineering, why it is authentic. So tell us in your own words what authentic learning looks like.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it on the head. I mean, I think it's about kind of bringing the real world into it. I've taken a lot of school, a lot of engineering classes, and it's to me, the deeper I got into it, the more real world it became, and that's probably by design for, with education. You got to teach the fundamentals, and for whatever reason, maybe it's harder to have meaningful real world examples and kind of more simpler fundamental problems. I don't know if that's the reason, but yeah, no, I've always enjoyed those conversations and really kind of stretching the thought of, okay, how can you take some of those fundamentals and really apply it
Hmm.
to a real world thing? Because I mean, let's face it, everybody looks at the world differently a little bit. They care about different things in the world. And so, my real world problem might be completely uninteresting to somebody else, and vice versa, So, yeah, I think in terms of authentic learning, it's like how do you as an individual, not how does Scott Anderson or Gina Anderson, but how do you as an individual tie what it is you're learning to the real world, to something that you really care about.
Yeah, I
That's
like
really
that.
authentic.
I like that idea because what you're talking about too is like you speak about your passion, finding the truth and this idea of truth and being creative to reach the truth. And at the end of the day, each person has to find what it is that they're really passionate about, right? And
Hmm.
this, sometimes people come to me or they'll email me or they'll call me and we'll talk about they're feeling down. I mean, we know that a whole host of folks are preferring to be alone, and we also know a whole host of folks with the research are feeling lonely. And what would you say to someone if you could tap into that call and they said, I've lost my passion, I really don't know how I'm going to go forward, I'm stuck in a job, I'm not happy, I'm feeling down, and they're in a dark place. Like, how would you help them bring light and life back to their world?
Mm. Um, that's a really good question. So let me kind of start my answer by kind of telling you something that happened to me a few years ago. I remember I was having a terrible day, and it was just like a lot of negativity. And I remember just randomly, I don't usually do this, but I walked into an art store, and I was looking at art, and I saw a painting, and I just remember being mesmerized. And I'm not like in one that really goes to art shows and stuff like that. But I just remember there was something in the way it was composed, the subject matter, that really resonated with me. And so much so that all I could do is just like the more I looked at it, the more it spoke to what I either already knew or what I was trying to articulate. But the more I looked at it, the more calm I felt, like the better I
Hmm.
felt, the more in tune I felt with who I was. Um, I kind of like to say, your passion is what you celebrate when no one is watching. You know,
Hmm.
when something like when you have a something that speaks to you like that, to me, when I feel low on passion, I go back to that. I go back to whatever it is. I think back, you know, maybe there's a piece of art that really speaks to you or speaks, or maybe there's a piece of music, or maybe it's a philosopher. Maybe it's something that somebody said to you in school, or maybe it's a relationship or something. But like passion is something that you really have to put forth effort with. It's like any
Hmm.
relationship, right? You can't get to know somebody without giving them time and spending time with them and putting forth the effort. The same goes with passion. So if you've lost your passion, you have to explore it. You know, you
Hmm.
don't have to start, you know, at 100%, start at 1%. You know, go back to to where you felt it before and re-explore that.
Yeah, I love that. Like really, really what you're saying is finding it again. Find it somewhere. Maybe it's, this morning, I know we got up and we ran and the moon was out. It was
Hmm.
absolutely beautiful. I mean, at the beginning of the day, every day is a new day. You don't have
Hmm.
to hold on to the day before. You can wake up and start your day afresh and anew. And like you said, you don't have to dwell in the past. You can make every day be the very best day and moment that it can be. And maybe it's the moon, maybe it's the moon. It doesn't have to
Hmm.
be something, a huge novel that you read, to
Right.
refine your passion and find meaning. So I love that answer. Thank you, Scott. Scott, is there anything else today that you would like to leave the audience with and share with us, as your lasting words? If you're not connected with Scott, definitely you have to know Scott. Scott is a great person to connect with, a good role model, a good friend. He's on LinkedIn. You can connect with him there for sure. Scott, leave us with some lasting words.
Hey, you know what? Go out and ask yourself, find what you celebrate when no one's watching.
All right.
That would be it.
There we go. Find what you celebrate when no one's
Good.
watching. I love that. Well, thank you for coming on my podcast and being here today, even though a snowstorm snowed in my guest. I appreciate you stepping in, and what a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much, Scott.